Hi, I'm Kim from Live Aware Now. I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing lots of cool information on emotion, on what it is, how to identify it, how to deal with it, and then how to use it to our advantage. So click the like buttons on my videos and then hit that subscribe button so that you'll have access to all my future videos. Thanks a lot. So in our bodies, we have a couple of different types of our nervous system. It's the way we've split up the concepts of them. We're going to be talking about the autonomic nervous system today. So the autonomic nervous system is all of those body processes that we do not have to think about. They're not conscious. They just go on, and there's no way we could follow and create all those in our bodies. So the number per second in our body that goes on, processes, chemical processes that go on in our body per second. All right. Now, if you have something where you can write this down, this would be probably a good visual. It is 37,000 billion. That is 37 followed by 21 zeros. That's per second in our body. I don't know about you, but I can barely keep track of a couple of things at any one time. And really, multitasking kind of sets me up for failure. So doing a single thing and putting all my awareness on it really ends up being more beneficial to me. But our bodies can handle that 37,000 billion per second. So in our autonomic system, that's what it's in charge of, and that's what's going on. So when in those systems, we have the parasympathetic side, which is our rest and digest, and we have our sympathetic side, which is our fight, flight, or freeze. And the fear that we're talking about sits in that fight, flight, or freeze side in the sympathetic system. So the best way to talk about this without being able to give you diagrams is to think of an animal. All right, let's think of a prey animal, because that can kind of put a little bit more distinction on it. So let's say we have a deer, and I'm out here in the woods, and I come across quite a few deer out here, and when they're out there by themselves and they're grazing or they're walking around or they're laying down, they are literally they're literally in a parasympathetic state at that point. So they're able to rest and digest and just hang out, and they're relaxed and they're enjoying themselves and just being a deer, right? So if I come upon them, they all of a sudden lift their heads and they're standing there and they're checking me out. They're switching over into that sympathetic system where they are being alert, and they're trying to assess the situation to see if they need to flee. Now, in the moment, when they're looking at me like that, though, they're freezing, right? They're freezing, so they're not drawing attention to themselves, because technically I'm a predator. I don't have a gun, but, they are hunted. And we have predators as well, the coyotes and bear and other things that would hunt them. So when they're in that alert state, they're switching over into that sympathetic system. And in that sympathetic system, their muscles are getting ready to act, if they have to fight or if they have to flee. All right? And so by doing that, by getting those muscles ready, it shuts off the blood flow to the organs. So their digestion is stopping while that sympathetic system is running. They're also getting hormones and neurotransmitters that are going in and getting their heart ready to pump hard and pump fast. And that's where you get your cortisol and your adrenaline and your noradrenaline that is being gushed out into the system, getting ready to make that instant decision whether they're going to fight or flee. it also puts a lot of emphasis on what they're hearing, all their senses, that they're hyper aroused. They're listening, their eyes are dilating so that they can see, their attention is narrowing on that potential threat, okay? So in that sympathetic system, it makes so much sense as to why their attention is narrowing, because they have to focus in on that potential issue, that potential problem. And then it also makes sense as to why, they're having, increased blood flow to the heart and increased stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And it also makes sense as to why their digestion is shutting down, because they need that blood flow out into their muscles so that they can do what they need to do to save their lives. The other thing is that the body's trying to free up as much energy as possible. So it is freeing up that blood flow and out into the muscles. It's also not paying attention to things that the immune system might be facing. It's pulling energy away from that immune system, because if that deer dies in that moment because of this threat, because of this predator, it's not going to have the energy to be able to do that. So it's pulling all of that energy out of even the immune system. It's not going to matter that the immune system is working if the deer is dead, okay, from that predator. So when that deer is there and it's in that sympathetic system, it is literally working to keep the animal alive in the moment. All right. So that deer, so I come across that deer and it's in that heightened state of awareness, and it's checking me out and it's trying to assess, am I a threat or am I just somebody that's walking by? Am I going to threaten its life, or am I, not a problem? So that deer, let's say we're walking upon it and it decides it needs to run away. So that deer is in a heightened state, it's in that sympathetic nervous system, it's in that sympathetic response, and it runs over the hill. When it gets over that hill, do you think it stands there and is like, checking it out? No, it assesses again and checks it out and sees, well, you know what, it's not that big a deal, so I can go back to eating. And that deer almost immediately will switch back into that parasympathetic system. Okay, the threat is gone, and it doesn't have to be on that alert like it was when I was walking by and it was having to assess whether or not I was going to kill it. So when it's in that non-threatening environment again, it immediately switches back over into that parasympathetic. It is relaxed, it's eating, it's just doing its own deer thing out in the woods. So it's able to now digest, and if it has an immune issue, let's say it had gotten a cut, or maybe it's fighting some type of infection, then its body can then go back and address those in that parasympathetic response. So looking at it from that perspective, it's pretty easy to tell between what is a sympathetic response and what is a parasympathetic response. So one of the things I want you guys to understand is that when we, in our society, think, we perceive everything as a threat, I'm late, I'm going to die, right? Then we are constantly in that sympathetic system, and we're constantly causing our body to tap into that constant drip of cortisol and adrenaline. And like I was saying yesterday, that constant drip of cortisol and adrenaline, keeping us into that sympathetic state, it reduces our immunity, it makes a mess of our digestion, so we can't absorb the nutrients that we need to, and then we also end up having issues with our health. The other thing to understand about the parasympathetic and sympathetic is that what it does to our brains. All right. So I talked a little bit about it yesterday, and that we literally shut off the prefrontal cortex. That prefrontal cortex is this front part, the front most recently evolved part of the human brain. That's our higher reasoning, and it's our emotional stability, if you will. It helps with emotional processing. And so it helps with our rational thinking. And when we're in that sympathetic state, we go into the fear center in our brain known as the amygdala, which is a primal part of our brain. We go into that place and we literally are shutting down that higher reasoning. We're literally shutting down the access to that prefrontal cortex. And, you know, there are studies that show that there are, like, when people start meditating, they literally grow their prefrontal cortex because they are redirecting their energy away from that sympathetic response. And so, yeah, I'm going to be doing a video, a literal video on this, where I can put some information up on slides and that kind of thing to explain the difference between the sympathetic and parasympathetic response. But I want you to really understand that this is one of the reasons why we have to really address and observe and work to get ourselves out of that fear, responsive, reactive mode. And why it has to be kind of a conscious thing, because unconsciously we're always going to stay tuned into that thing, that feeling of, you know, we're going to die, right? And we're not, right? If we're late to a situation, we might feel like, you know, we're stuck in a traffic jam and we're behind that wheel, and you know, the aggravation is mounting, and it's like, dang it all, you know, getting angry, getting upset, getting afraid, right? And I can say, I'm going to die if I don't make that meeting. Well, are we really? No, we're not going to die if we don't make that meeting. Although, you know, we could die on the way if we go and we start driving erratically, right? But that idea that we tell ourselves all the time that we're going to die in all these situations, we're not. But what it does do is it keeps us on that constant drip of cortisol and adrenaline, which causes all of these other issues. And it consolidates our attention into that amygdala and into that area of the brain, the fear center, and it's sucking away our attention from that prefrontal cortex and that higher reasoning. So I really want to make sure that people understand this. It's something that's definitely been more talked about in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's possible that you guys all understand this, but in order to move forward on understanding fear and then what we need to do about it and how to address it, this parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system is something that we really need to have a handle on and understand. Once you do, then it makes so much sense as to why, you know, people don't think they're best when they're feeling fear, and why people, you know, do stupid things, right? I mean, you know, I've done stupid things when I felt afraid. And also digestion, right? You know, and we need good digestion. Also, wide, you know, being in that sympathetic system and not being able to shut off from it, not being able to unhook that drip of those hormones. It's also why we don't end up sleeping very well, because we literally have a hard time unplugging. So future videos, I'm going to explain this more in other ways and other facets of it. There's literally a, you know, this is fascinating, you guys, but I really think I'm going to need a whiteboard to explain this. But our bodies can literally get addicted to this rush of adrenaline and cortisol. So like any other addiction, you know, there's a biochemical reason for it, and I'm going to go into that as well later on. So much to cover, you guys. I'm having a hard time like deciphering these downs into these small chunks to be able to give on these lives. I definitely am going to be creating more videos to go into this further. But yeah, so that's it today, right? Parasympathetic and sympathetic, those are our responses. And you know, your adrenaline, your cortisol, your noradrenaline, those are the things that get gushed out, or that constant drip, however your reaction is, if it's constant or if it's some immediate threat. But we need to get a control on that. and that's going to help us with being able to think clearer, and it's going to help our health and especially our immunity. Okay, so, and you know, those are all things we really need right now. All right, so that's what I'm going to do for today, and it's an absolutely gorgeous day out here today. I hope that I addressed the wind noise. I had quite a bit of that yesterday, so hopefully we got that working. Hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks so much. Love you guys. Mwah!